Well, hello. We have made it to November, and I want to bring you the latest data here in the Austin metro area. I want to start with the fact that Austin is number one. We are number one on lots of lists right now, both good and bad. And I'm going to share with you kind of a little of both, some of the good headlines and some of the bad headlines. Then we're going to pivot over. I'll share some data that we got in from the third quarter. We're going to move into right now and looking at some of the statistics as we start November. And finally, we're going to wrap it up with interest rates. Been a little sticker shock there, so stick around with that. So let's talk about the good. Right now, we are at the end of 2024, and Austin continues to be one of the top fastest growing cities in America. According to the US Census, we are still number one. So the metro area is booming. In the last, call it 14 years, we've grown over 25%. I'll spin you down to where it talks about Austin a little more in detail. So the city has just under a million people. The county has about approaching 2.3 million in 2024. If I go back to 2010, the metro was 1.72 million, and now we're 2.23 million. We've grown about 26% in that time, which is really nice. Number one in the US. We're also leading a number of lists. The Milken Institute, which puts out a big study every year, ranked the Austin Round Rock metro area tops in terms of performance. This has to do with bringing jobs to the metro, wage growth, just an overall economic climate that is helping business grow. Austin's also leading the list. I don't know who comes up with all these. Forbes came up with we're the second healthiest city in America. Clearly, they're not eating barbecue or Tex-Mex, but we'll take it. And we were declared America's best college town for 2025. People sometimes forget that the University of Texas is right smack in the middle of the city, and it's also one of the largest colleges in America. So that's the good news. So what's the problem? Why is Austin also ranking poorly on other metrics? Well, here's one of them. So what is the cost of purchasing a home versus renting a single family starter home, looking at different metros? So this was just put out by PwC's Emerging Trends in Real Estate report. This just came out last week. So this is looking at a lot of metros. Well, look who's at the bottom of that list. So at the very top, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Columbus, Ohio, Chicago, these are considered more affordable places where the gap between your mortgage payment and costs to buy it versus the gap to rent it really isn't that different. Obviously, it is still more expensive to buy the property, but it's still within, 30% or less to buy that property. As you work down the list, Dallas is at 46% more expensive. San Antonio's 53% more expensive. Houston 42, but Austin is 95% more expensive to buy the house than it is to rent the house by almost $2,100. So why is that? Well, here's one of the reasons. Homeowners, this just came out last week, homeowners shell out a lot more in property taxes in Austin than they do in almost any other city for their monthly payments. So they're up about 30% since 2019 across the nation, property tax for most homeowners. But property taxes in Austin made up more of a monthly housing bill, almost 20% in Austin than anywhere else in the country. Other cities like San Antonio, Houston, and Fort Worth saw their percent of how much the property tax is for their monthly bills. They're between 18 and 19% of that monthly bill. Austin's pushing almost 20%. So property tax is really taking a bite. And that's something that people forget about when they just look at home price or they just look at interest rates. That's only a portion of your monthly payment. A big portion is also property tax. So that's been hurting Austin there. All right, let's switch over to Q3. So we're going to look at some charts that came out. Bramlett Real Estate loves putting these out, so I love tracking them and using them. So we're looking at Q1 and Q3 the first 3 quarters of each year, starting in 2019 through now. So if we just look at the first 9 months of each of these years, sold units you can see are way down since interest rates went up. And so 2021, we peaked. That was COVID crazy. But units compared to the 10-year average are down almost 25% in that time. Days to sell a property So again, here's the 10-year average, call it 39 days. We're way up over 60 days. And in some areas, it's much, much longer than that. Depends on what the inventory, what the type of property is and where it is in the metro. But days to sell, way above average. This one hurts. This is success rate. What is success rate? Well, if you list your home, what is the chance it's going to sell at all? Well, during the pandemic, it was high. It was 90+%. Like you list it, it's going to sell. Now we are way down. We're below 70%. So less than 7 out of 10 homes are going to sell, is essentially what they're saying. Now, there's a lot of complexity to that equation. Some sellers need a certain price. They're just not simply going to sell lower. They're not willing to wait for the amount of time it takes to get enough buyers in the front door, or they're not willing to list low enough to make that property attractive to buyers. So we are seeing lots of properties test the market, come back off. They try their price, they don't get their price, they come back off. So the success rate is way below average. And then sold volume, this one always seems a little surprising to people, but sold volume is about dollar price. We're still up 40% from 2020 in value. So most properties are up 40-50% from where they were, again, 5 years ago. So that means when they do sell, the dollar volume is still higher. So we're still right around the 10-year average. If you think back 10 years ago, the properties were less than 50% this cost. You had to sell a lot more homes to get the same dollar volume. And then median sold price, we're down, obviously. So we had peaked over the curve. But if you take a 6.4% annual appreciation rate, which was kind of what we saw the last decade, which is high. Nationally, that's typically 3 or 4%. We were doing way bigger than that because of why? All this growth, population growth. But of course, that made everything expensive. It made the homes expensive. It made the property taxes expensive. It's made homeowners insurance go up. And what's happened is, again, the cost to buy is much more expensive than the cost to rent. And it's probably leading to more people renting at this time because of that equation. So that was the third quarter. Let's look at some current data. So now we're in the very beginning of November, and we're going to look at historical sales price trend. Do your best. Please ignore this bar on the right. We just started November. We really haven't had many closed sales at all. In fact, we probably only had one day, maybe last Friday. So whatever closed last Friday is making this bar go up. But start here in April. You can see the median home prices trickled up some. We peaked out in April around 455,000 for the metro. And with higher rates, we saw it come down, 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 down. September, we were around 425. It popped up a little bit in October. The only thing I can attribute to that is, you had a lot of people come back from the summer, so maybe we had a little more buyer activity. But actually, I think it has to do with rates. I'll show that to you here in a second. It just might have allowed buyers to just pay a little bit more for that house because rates did come down some. And so anyways, that is October. I predict that once we're done with November, this bar right here is going to be at least equal or below the September bar. So I have a feeling we're going to still be on a decline as we finish out the year. This is active versus sold listings. So what we're looking at here, the green are how many properties, these are single family, on the market right now. And you can see it peaked in the summer. It's coming down. And then the blue is how many sold per month. So as of right now, October sold just under 2,300. That might bump up just a little bit if there's a few more agents that still haven't closed out their MLS listing. But ultimately, it's really anemic. So we're only selling, 2,300 homes a month. Whereas if it's really rocking, it would be closer to 4,000, almost double. But we still have, 12,300 on the market. As we're sitting here in November, we're sitting right around 12,000. So if you've got, 2,300 a month selling and 12,000 on the market, you're at least 5 or 6 months of inventory right there. So it's going to be a slower sales market. Let's talk about interest rates. This one hurts too. So I'll show you in a chart in just a second. When the Fed announced, or even we knew the Fed was going to announce that they likely were going to lower rates back in September, the bond market was kind of pre-forecasting the fact that things were slowing down and rates were really coming down to the point where we got into the low sixes. Fed made their announcement and everybody's thinking, hey, this is only going to get better from here. The opposite has happened. So now you've got uncertainty in the market. You have an election this week where people just aren't sure what's going to happen. You have a Fed announcement this week. People aren't sure what's going to happen. And the bond market is nervous that inflation's going to stick around longer, number one, and that number two, if neither candidate for president takes a real shot at controlling government spending, well, that means how does the government get paid for? More bonds. You got to make more bonds. You got to sell more bonds, and that means the investors to buy those bonds are going to want more return, which means they need a higher rate. So think about it. If you have to sell 10 homes, you got to give them a better deal. And so that means they've got to lower the price of the bond, which creates a higher return. And that return impacts mortgage rates. So right now we're sitting around 7%. This is a big week. We have a presidential election. We have a Fed announcement. So there's going to be a lot going on in just a few days. We'll have to watch that and see what happens. Rates refuse to drop ahead of the election. What happens after? That really is the big question for the week. And this will show you a chart. The last time we were above 7% was back in July. And I can tell you the spring was slow. Summer was slow. Why? Because rates were high. Buyers were just not feeling it. But from mid-July, rates got under 6 and they kept coming down ahead of that Fed announcement. Everybody's getting pretty excited. There were some people, including myself, that refinanced kind of in this rate. And we got some pretty nice rates. Some people even got a 5 on the front of their interest rate. But literally, since the Fed announced, we've just seen rates skyrocket back up above 7%. Where do they go from here is the million-dollar question. We really don't know. So pay attention to that. I think we'll know a lot. Hopefully, by the end of this week, maybe we will have a new candidate in the White House. We will have a Fed announcement, and that might take, hopefully, some of that uncertainty out of the market. Anyways, I hope this was helpful. If you're buying right now, this is a great window where there really isn't a lot of activity out there. People are kind of sitting on their hands with the election and with holidays. I don't expect a lot of buyer activity to pick up between now and, let's say, the beginning of the year. So if you're looking to buy, this is a chance to have some conversations with sellers and see if you can buy a great property. Obviously, be in close contact with your lender because rates have proven to be extremely volatile, and we want to make sure that you are running numbers and know when you can lock in your rate. If you're a seller right now, you heard what I just told buyers. Just know you're going to have to be patient. If we're selling right now, make sure your price is attractive to buyers and be willing to have conversations with buyers if they are interested to bring you an offer. There's going to be some negotiation there. Anyways, hope this was helpful. If you want to follow our videos each and every week, make sure to click that subscribe button on YouTube at Ryan Kelly Group. And of course, if you know somebody looking to buy, sell, or invest in the Austin market, great time to chat with us, especially as we see that new data coming out. And you can also prepare if you're doing something for 2025. Anyways, hope you went out and vote. If you didn't, you got to vote this week. And we'll talk to you next Monday. Thanks.